19.1 The Demand for a Factor of Production. In this chapter, we study meaning of demand for factors of production, meaning of value of marginal product, the firm's demand for labor and labor curve, changes in firm's demand for labor. The demand for a factor of production. The demand for a factor of production is a derived demand. It is derived from the demand for the goods and services that labor produces. For example, the demand for gas station attendants is inseparably linked to the supply of gasoline. The quantities of facts of production demanded are the consequence of the firm's output decision. A firm hires quantities of product of production that produce the firm's profit maximizing output. To decide the quantity of factor of production to hire, a firm compares the cost of hiring an additional unit of the factor with its value to the firm. The cost of hiring an additional unit of a factor of production is the factor price. Value of marginal product. The value of the firm of hiring one more unit of a factor of production is called the factor's value of marginal product. We calculate the value of marginal product as the price of the unit of output multiplied by the marginal product of the factor of production. VMP is equal to MP times P. Table shows you how to calculate the value of the marginal product of labor at Angelio's bakery. Angelio can sell bread at the going market price of $2 a loaf. Given this information, we can calculate the value of the marginal product. Fourth column, it equals price multiplied by marginal product. For example, the marginal product of hiring the second worker is 6 loaves. Each loaf sold brings in $2, so the value of the marginal product of the second worker is $12. Demand for labor. The value of the marginal product of labor tells us what an additional worker is worth to a firm. It tells us the revenue that the firm earns by hiring one more worker. The wage rate tells us what an additional worker costs a firm. The value of marginal product of labor and the wage rate together determine the quantity of labor demanded by the firm. Because the value of marginal product decreases as the quantity of labor employed increases, there is a simple rule for maximizing profit. Hiring the quantity of labor at which the value of the marginal product equals the wage rate. If the value of marginal product of labor exceeds the wage rate, a firm can increase its profit by hiring one more worker. If the wage rate exceeds the value of marginal product of labor, a firm can increase its profit by firing one worker. But if the wage rate equals the value of the marginal product of labor, the firm cannot increase its profit by changing the number of workers it employs. The firm is making the maximum possible profit. So, the quantity of labor demanded by a firm is the quantity at which the value of the marginal product of labor equals the wage rate. Figure shows Angelio's demand for labor curve. The firm's demand for labor curve is derived from its value of marginal product curve. If the wage rate falls and other things remain the same, a firm hires more workers. Suppose the wage rate is $10 an hour. You can see in figure A that if Angelio hires 2 workers, the value of the marginal product of labor is $12 an hour. At the wage rate of $10 an hour, the Angelio makes a profit of $2 an hour on the second worker. If Angelio hires a third worker, the value of the marginal product of that worker is $10 an hour. So on this third worker, Angelio breaks even. If Angelio hired 4 workers, his profit would fall. The fourth worker generates a value of marginal product of only $8 an hour but costs $10 an hour. So Angelio does not hire the fourth worker. When the wage rate is $10 an hour, the quantity of labor demanded by Angelio is 3 workers. Figure B shows Angelio's demand for labor curve D. At $10 an hour, the quantity of labor demanded by Angelio is 3 workers. If the wage rate increased to $12 an hour, Angelio would decrease the quantity of labor demanded to 2 workers. If the wage rate decreased to $8 an hour, Angelo would increase the quantity of labor demanded to 4 workers. A change in the wage rate brings a change in the quantity of labor demanded and a movement along the demand for labor curve. A change in the other influence on a firm's labor hiring plans changes the demand for labor and shifts the demand for labor curve. Changes in the firm's demand for labor. A firm's demand for labor depends on the price of the firm's output, the prices of other factors of production, technology. The price of the firm's output. The higher the price of the firm's output, the greater is the firm's demand for labor. The price the output affects the demand for labor through its influence on the value of marginal product of labor. A higher price for the firm's output increases the value of the marginal product of labor. A change in the price of the firm's output leads to a shift in the firm's demand for labor curve. If the price of the firm's output increases, the demand for labor increases and the demand for labor curve shifts rightward. For example, if the price of bread increased to $3 a loaf, the value of the marginal product of Angelio's fourth worker would increase from $8 an hour to $12 an hour. At the wage rate of $10 an hour, Angelio would now hire 4 workers instead of 3. The prices of other factors of production. If the price of using capital decreases relative to the wage rate, a firm substitutes capital for labor and increases the quantity of capital it uses. Usually, the demand for labor will decrease when the price of using capital falls. For example, if the price of a bread making machine falls, Angelio might decide to install one machine and lay off a worker. But the demand for labor could increase if the lower price of capital led to a sufficiently large increase in the scale of production. For example, with cheaper machines available, Angelio might install a machine and hire more labor to operate it. This type of factor substitution occurs in the long run when the firm can change the size of its plant. Technology. New technologies decrease the demand for some types of labor and increase the demand for other types. For example, if a new automated bread making machine becomes available, Angelo might install one of these machines and fire most of its workforce, a decrease in demand for bakery workers. But the firms that manufacture and service automated bread making machines hire more labor. So there is an increase in demand for this type of labor. An event similar to this one occurred during the 1990s when the introduction of electronic telephone exchanges decreased the demand for telephone operators and increased the demand for computer programmers and electronics engineers. So here the chart shows the law of demand. The quantity of labor demanded by a firm decreases if the wage rate increases, and increases if the wage rate decreases, as per the law of demand. This is movement along the demand curve for labor, whereas changes in demand, which brings a shift in the demand curve for labor. So those are the firm's demand for labor decreases if the price of the firm's output decreases, and the demand for labor increases if the price of the firm's output increases. The price of a substitute for labor falls and decreases the demand for labor, and the demand for labor increases, the price of a substitute for labor rises. The price of a complement of labor rises, then there will be a decrease in the demand for labor and increase in the demand for labor if the price of complement of labor falls. The last one is the firm's demand for labor decreases if the new technology or new capital decreases the marginal product of labor, and it increases the demand for labor if the new technology or new capital increases the marginal product of labor.